With that, I'll just switch off my video and
Okay, Anisha, I don't know if you were meaning to mute yourself, but
welcome,
you were
Neha. Yes,
muted.
I muted everybody and realized that I
Oh, you
muted
did.
myself as well. That was brilliant. Yeah.
So let me share my screen and hopefully this will work out okay. Um, and do you see avocados again?
Not yet, but they took a second last time. So
Oh no, then I'm not, no. I think they took a second because I wasn't doing something right. So hang on.
Yeah,
Okay.
avocados are on now.
yes.
Okay. All right, great. So should I go ahead and get started?
Yes, please.
Okay, wonderful. And I'm just gonna move the Zoom out 1 second. All right, so I cannot see anyone and I cannot see the chat. But if anyone wants to stop me, I guess they're welcome to. If there's anything that you're not following. So hi everybody. Good afternoon, good evening. I know there's a couple of you calling in also from India. So whatever time of day it is for you, I hope that it's good. It's an honor to be speaking to you today, and thank you, Anisha, for the kind invitation. I want to start with an introduction to just briefly walk you through my journey at the intersection of play and development. Positionality is important, and my hope is that understanding that will give you a better understanding of also my work and my talk. Let's see. Okay, so I was born and brought up in New Delhi, which is also where I am right now. I went to high school in Germany. I ended up at UC Berkeley for college, and here I majored in computer science and applied math. And I also got my master's in computer science, and then another in the School of Education in Learning Design and Technology, and both from Stanford. And the shift from computer science to education was enabled by my time working as a software design engineer in Microsoft's PowerPoint team. And here I discovered the then brand new field of ICTD, that's ICTs and Global Development, through this paper that I read, which was by Eric Brewer and his colleagues at Berkeley. And this was seeking to make a case for technology in developing regions, as the paper is titled. Somewhat serendipitously, I came to be involved in the TeachAids project and also the Milli project. And I'll talk about both of these in a bit. Before coming back to do my PhD in this field. So during my PhD, which was back at UC Berkeley, I conducted an ethnography of the adoption of mobile technologies in rural, small town, and urban India, where I interrogated the role that leisure played in supporting and in enabling development. And I was able to operationalize the findings of my dissertation in my postdoc research at the University of Washington, where I was working on an mHealth, a maternal and newborn health intervention in rural India. In recent years, I've been leading the Tandem Lab. Tandem is short for Technology and Design Towards Empowerment. And this is at Georgia Tech, where I do research at the intersection of human-centered computing and global development to study how emerging technologies might be and are being integrated using assets-based approaches towards empowerment. So that's my introduction. And now I'll go over the role that play plays in development. So to understand that, we must get on the same page regarding what development is. Often we refer to development in terms of good change, and it's not clear what this term means exactly, even as increasingly we find ourselves surrounded by people, by efforts, by initiatives that are targeting social good. So it's easy enough to get behind this goal, but it's also important to know exactly what social good or development is being targeted and for whom. The draw for engaging with development for me and for many others is that it plants us on a path to meet certain goals that we sense we can get behind, such as the global goals, also known as the Sustainable Development Goals, which I suspect many of you would be familiar with. So these have been framed by the United Nations and are increasingly shaping how countries across the world through the global north and the global south approach development. And here, I want to clarify that the global north and south are considered to be, I guess, the more politically correct terms these days by which to refer to the erstwhile developed and developing worlds. These goals may or may not align with everyone's view of what development or social good should entail. For example, goal number 5 for gender equality does not make mention of non-binary identities. Also, play or leisure don't make an appearance in the framing of these 17 goals. The development discourse is considered to have begun in 1949 when US President Harry Truman gave his inaugural address, also in the interest of targeting the global, social, and economic good. And he said, we must embark on a bold new program for making the benefits of our scientific advances and industrial progress available for the improvement and growth of underdeveloped areas. We should make available to peace-loving peoples the benefits of our store of technical knowledge in order to help them realize their aspirations for a better life. He meant well, possibly. And the United Nations also had good intentions. I guess when in 1951, it decreed the following, saying there is a sense in which rapid economic progress is impossible without painful adjustments. Ancient philosophies have to be scrapped. Old social institutions have to disintegrate. Bonds of caste, creed, and race have to burst, and large numbers of persons who cannot keep up with progress have to have their expectations of a comfortable life frustrated. Very few communities are willing to pay the full price of economic progress. So there are many different types of good intentions. And there are many, many scholars from diverse disciplines such as economics, design, gender studies, political philosophy, and more, who have pushed back against utilitarian ideals that I just mentioned. These include Arturo Escobar, Amartya Sen, Chandra Mohanty, Martha Nussbaum, and others, and I draw on their work. Development and social good look very different when we view them through these lenses. As Amartya Sen has said, for instance, development consists of the removal of various types of unfreedoms that leave people with little choice and little opportunity of exercising their reasoned agency. The removal of substantial unfreedoms, it is argued here, is constitutive of development. All this is to say that good intentions are good, but development can be defined and operationalized in many different ways. And we must be careful to articulate which definition we're inclined towards, what and whose good we're aiming to address, because we live in an unequal world where there are many that are marginalized, oppressed, and struggling for survival to varying degrees. And when the resources we have access to are constrained, then what's good for one may in fact inflict harm on another. Having said that, I want to now focus on play and the work that play does and has done in development so far. Here, I frame play as an asset, and let me first explain what I mean by that. The dominant development discourse and much of HCI work, broadly speaking, has been framed around lack. So what's missing, what's needed, rather than the assets and strengths, material or non-material, that might exist. Assets-based approaches have been proposed and they've been practiced in the fields of community development and education for a long time. And they're increasingly finding their way into other disciplines, including HCI. This body of work argues for a departure from deficits-based thinking to identifying, engaging, and leveraging individual and community strengths. So to illustrate, we can view people as being socioeconomically disadvantaged, as victims of patriarchy, infrastructurally challenged, discriminated by caste, class, or race, or all of the above. We can also recognize that they have assets. So yes, they are rapidly becoming owners of mobile technologies and have access to the internet, but there might be several other, perhaps non-material assets, such as the presence of care, extensive social ties, human agency, and others that could be leveraged. So a focus on deficits promotes dependency and also robs agency from potential change makers, while an assets-based approach brings our attention to what people already have, their existing knowledges, strengths, and capacities. So how does play work as an asset? There are two predominant ways in which we can see play operating as an asset in development. First, by generating the push for development outcomes, and second, by being responsible for the pull for related outcomes. And I will illustrate both with examples that I know best. Focusing first on push. I mentioned that I worked on the Milli and the Teach projects in my intro, so I'll talk a little bit more about these two. The Milli project entailed mobile and immersive learning of English as a second language in rural Karnataka in India, also later in rural Uttar Pradesh in North India. Using participant observation, interviews, and co-design, the goal of this project was to design and test mobile games that would teach these children English based on games that they played in real life. I mentioned earlier that this was my first field research experience, and I want to acknowledge the high bar that it's set for the role of co-design in such projects, because it really involved local teachers, students, NGOs throughout. Particularly given the gap that existed between the lead researcher, who is a Singaporean living in US in this case, and the participant group, which included children living in a village in South India. The work was excellent. It won multiple CHI awards through the years, but it also raised some challenges and questions. So first, there could only be limited uptake because the tech was ahead of its time here, and it was owned by the research team. English learning was viewed as important for economic mobility, but this also honors a colonial past and is gradually but steadily leading to erasure of local languages. And finally, offline games were translated to online games, which was great. However, association with offline games, which was that they were a waste of time, was also translated to the online games. Teach Aids was a project that was aimed at leveraging cultural insights to address taboos that might restrict student learning on topics of critical importance. In India, such taboos have led multiple states to ban materials intended to educate youth about HIV, putting millions at risk. In our CHI 2017 paper, we presented the design of Teach Aids, which was an animated curriculum that provides comprehensive HIV education while circumventing taboos in a way that is playful and culturally responsive. Using a mixed methods evaluation, which involved around 150 design iterations, we demonstrated that this curriculum left students with significantly increased knowledge about HIV and reduced stigma towards those that were infected by the virus. Validating the effectiveness of Teach Aids in circumventing taboos, the students also reported comfort in learning from the software. And it has since been deployed in tens of thousands of schools throughout India. The curriculum was formally adopted and distributed by the governments of states like Karnataka that had previously banned other forms of HIV education, and Andhra Pradesh, where HIV positive children were previously expelled from schools. The success of this model and the approach have broader implications for the design and implementation of interactive technologies when we're looking at providing education on sensitive topics in health and in other areas. Having seen Pia Sarkar labor through this success, Pia is the one whose master's and PhD project were this project basically. I want to call out the incredible investment and also the incredible connections that it takes to achieve change at such a massive scale, like literally including all of the states in India. Also, some might argue that sidestepping the elephant might be less preferred to confronting and even embracing the elephant head on. Meaning to say that maybe circumventing taboos works short term, but it doesn't work to remove these taboos in the long run. So in both of these projects, and in many others like them, playfulness and games have been leveraged to drive outcomes in the realms of health and education, as well as other development domains. As one example, my PhD student, Anupriya Thuli's paper studied the Menstrupedia platform and evaluated its comic book approach to addressing menstrual stigma. And then there's Brij Kothari's early work on same language subtitling, which showed that watching Bollywood songs with moving subtitles could lead to literacy gains. So in the words of Ferreira, who says, "We have seen how games and entertainment can bring about positive benefits as educational strategies. We have seen how they can help in engaging people with technological interventions, as well as providing motivation for users participating in other projects. by not restricting some of the non-prescribed uses. While we find this type of instrumentalization of play a rather narrow view on the phenomena, it is nonetheless one that should be respected, since it helps steer away from a vision where play may harm or detract from development goals. I'll now turn to work that further stresses the importance of focusing on playful and non-instrumental uses of technology in talking about play as pull. Ethnographic studies of leisure-driven adoption in the realm of development have highlighted how development-friendly outcomes might also result from people's practices that are focused on play. There are two projects that I've been involved with that showcase this. So one is my own dissertation, which was a Facebook adoption among new technology users in urban India. And this is when mobile phones were just taking off. And the second is my PhD students' dissertation work, which focused on uncovering modes of information access in Cuba. So in my dissertation, I took a critical ethnographic approach to emphasize the importance of looking at leisure-driven technology adoption for the development discourse. One of the studies that I did as part of this research looked at Facebook adoption among young adults, predominantly male young adults. In fact, that's how I ended up looking at gender in the process. And this was in New Delhi as data plans and mobile internet were just starting to become affordable. My research highlighted how participants had come to engage with mobile phones and how this engagement had then led to enhanced digital and new media literacies in many different ways, in the hope of improved eventual employment opportunities. One participant, who I'll call Mohan, shared, I chat with my friends. I have friends worldwide because of gaming. I play lots of games, Mafia Wars, Cafe World, Farm Villa, as he called it. These are just the ones I play every day. There are many, many more. You can get lost in them. On Facebook, you meet a lot of new people, learn a lot of new things from them. You get entertainment also. There were so many things I did not know about the world that I know now. The world is so diverse, so big. Like him, there were many others who felt similarly empowered through this continued connection on Facebook and on other social media channels. This tendency to make do, or jugar as it's called, was visible also in the case of Streetnet in Cuba, in the form of resolver, which literally translates in Cuba to resolve or to solve. Michael and I, who is my PhD student that I co-advised on this project alongside Amy Brookman, refers to resolver as a cultural ideology describing the ways that people work together to invent, make do, reuse, and persist despite hardships. Streetnet is a community network that emerged as an alternative to the World Wide Web in Havana, Cuba. It started out as a gaming network in the mid-2000s and then evolved into much more. This study was part of Michael Ann's dissertation research, and it reveals the workings of Streetnet, especially the acts of maintenance and care that go into it on a daily basis in just keeping the network running. And Michael Ann writes, as more users joined SNET, it evolved from a gaming network to a thriving mini internet with digital sites and services mirroring websites on the World Wide Web. Users have designed websites that host community forums, social networking sites, dating services, classifieds, and content production communities. There are also sites that host copies of websites from the World Wide Web, including Wikipedia and Revolico, a Cuban version of Craigslist. The focus on leisure-driven adoption in the context of development has highlighted that where there's a will, there's a way. And in the words of Chirumamila and Bal, who write about play and power and the value of taking a ludic design approach in ICTD, thinking about fun, we contend, they say, is more than just a shallow acknowledgement of people's desire for entertainment. This is not a call to gamify development work. Rather, thinking about fun entails a thoughtful and studied approach to the way that people choose to live, to how they choose to live, and to what things people desire in the run of their everyday lives, whether they are outwardly useful or not. This is a call for observation of a kind to the smaller pleasures of everyday life, to the way in things that are not easily measurable or even noticeable without an effort can carry significant meaning to those people in whose lives ICTD wishes to intervene. It's worth asking, of course, if play might act as both push and pull. What does this look like? What does this overlap look like? On the push side, this means that there's a clear intent to develop through intervening. And on the pull side, it must also be clear through long-term inquiry what type of leisure or play the communities in question are truly driven towards. There are two projects that I've been involved in that I use here as examples. The first one is Projecting Health. So this project was targeted at reducing maternal and child mortality in rural Uttar Pradesh in India. And in this project, short, high quality films with rich storylines on topics relevant to maternal health were created and screened by and for members of the community. Through the course of this project, which ran over many years, we conducted many interviews, focus groups, participant observation, and surveys. And we used low-cost camcorders, portable video projectors, and free video editing software. Our goal here was to target behavior change at the household level, and the intervention was deployed in 2 districts and 150 villages, targeting a population of about 200,000 people in all. In over 6 years, 110 short films were produced and more than 15,000 group disseminations were organized. There were many different stakeholders that were involved here, including the University of Washington, where I was located at the time, and then PATH, the Global Health Organization, community-based organizations, local communities, the state healthcare system, and so on. So it was really quite a wide variety of actors. And I was studying the processes that were involved in the storytelling and the video creation, which you can see in some of the photos here, where members of the community were crafting health messages and they factored in the process the advice of experts and other community voices. The video production team then worked with the community to storyboard and film and produce these videos. And I was studying the processes that were involved in the dissemination of videos. And this was mostly offline, but it took place through multiple means. So women would get together in a public space, such as a local school, and the health worker would set up the portable projector, screen the video, and moderate a discussion. These sessions were organized about once a month, but the interesting thing was that there were soon ad hoc disseminations that came to be held because the health workers started to take things in their own hands. So I drew on these findings as well as insights from my dissertation work to then iterate on the design of the health intervention. Interviews had shown that the men widely assumed that the women would not know how to use multimedia features on their phones. But when I interviewed the women alone, they had a different story to tell. And our paper offered among the earliest accounts of women from rural communities in the global south engaging with mobile phones on their own terms, creating, generating media, sharing media. And those are the findings that reshape the design of this intervention to include dissemination through mobile media downloads. And there were many points that were in support of mobile disseminations. So for instance, as I mentioned, the health workers were already fairly savvy mobile users, even though the men did not know that. And they were using these devices all the time. The women in the targeted households didn't have much free time to always be able to make these in-person meetings. But because they had phones and they had some time here and there to watch videos on their phones, this flexibility was really valuable for the intervention. Also, children played a role as valuable intermediaries because they could help with the phones or with the content when necessary. So there were many different aspects that kind of came together to make this health ecology work. This was Projecting Health. It followed a truly community-led video education model. The content of the health messaging, I want to note, however, was determined based on WHO standards. And reflecting back, I would say that this may or may not always be advisable. And so my final example here is that of Makercard. After spending years doing research with different underserved communities, Azra Ismail and Aditya Vishwanath, who are both current and former students, co-founded Makercard. This is a makerspace that caters to communities in Mumbai and India, aiming to create a safe and open community space and facilitate social and economic change at the hyper-local level, supporting the creation of community leaders. And this is run by staff and volunteers from surrounding areas. So these students, they say on the website, among youth in particular, there is a thirst to challenge the status quo and maximize their potential, but limited opportunities. Makercard provides a platform where they can nurture and showcase their talents in an environment where they are free to experiment and contribute to society in a variety of ways. The key objectives of Makercard, as stated on their website, are these. So first, a maker mindset, which encourages youth to develop a sense of agency and confidence to creatively solve problems that are relevant to their community. And this not only entails technical and soft skills, but also aims to train them with regards to design and to implement solutions that are locally relevant. And this also involves many fun activities of exploration. Then it aims to be community centric. So students provide the human resources and the energy for driving various activities at Makercard. And they are the ones who identify the challenges and approaches that are most compelling and relevant to the communities. It aims to be collaborative. So students are not only using the resources of the center to generate original products, but they also help and inspire other students to realize their ideas. And these partnerships between the students, the researchers, social enterprises, domain experts, and more are really key for the projects to be successful. It's self-driven, so the space provides a scaffolding to the point where students are able to advance their own learning. At least that is the goal. Students graduate from Makercard so that they can pursue their own careers. And the hope is that alumni of the space will go on to inspire others in their communities. And finally, it intends to be inclusive, so to support populations for whom opportunities to engage in such activities may be limited. This shows up in small things like the location, the timings, the costs of workshops and programs to enable as many people to attend as possible. So these views of play as push and play as pull that we saw are seemingly disparate views, but what can we learn from them both? So the examples of Milli and Teachaids highlight that co-design approaches and a playful approach in particular can lead us to so-called serious outcomes. And the examples from Facebook Cues in India and Streetnet in Cuba highlight that play can lead us to those serious outcomes while also honoring the agency and the value systems of our users, intended users. When we're able to combine push and pull, as we attempted in both cases of projecting health and Makercard, we arrive at a combination of approaches that are well situated, culturally speaking, and they target the changes that communities desire and aspire for. But it's no less important to view play as an asset in and of itself, as neither push nor pull. In Aurora's book on the next billion users, she poses important and hard-hitting questions. Why should it even be a question, she asks, whether people who are poor should enjoy themselves? Why do some people begrudge others who are struggling when they seek an occasional indulgence? Aren't we all entitled to moments of pleasure and joy? Does poverty have to be miserable? Is productivity a moral requirement of poverty? So I want to outline the takeaways from this body of work. First, we agree that it is important to target development outcomes, whether in the short term or the long term. Good intentions may not be everything, but they are necessary. And so is the humility to acknowledge that good intentions do not guarantee good outcomes. And we must carefully consider who has a voice in the design process. So ensuring stakeholder participation is a crucial affordance of co-design. And we found this through Milli, Teachaids, Projecting Health, and Makercard. Also, whose knowledge counts? How do we embrace decolonizing approaches to ensure that we're not harming existing cultures, erasing existing knowledges? This line of work is increasingly gaining ground in HCI, and we must support it and nurture it for the collective good of our field. And finally, can we do all this while preserving the dignity and enabling the freedoms of all people involved, like Sen, like Nussbaum, and many others say to do? And I conclude with an invitation to work with us to further enhance the value of play as an asset for and in development, however you choose to define it. Never mind if it is as push or pull or both or a goal unto itself. Also, never mind if this is a context that's new to you or one that you haven't explored before or cannot completely identify with. Because in the words of Barbara Smith, in a book by Kianga Yamada Taylor on Black feminism and the Combahee River Collective, she says, this is a time for solidarity. I mean, it's like just because and I'm doing the theoretical I here or the figurative I, just because I have health coverage here doesn't mean I shouldn't be standing in solidarity with those who stand to lose it under this regime. Just because I have a US passport doesn't mean I'm not supposed to be standing in solidarity with people who are undocumented, because that's how we win and that's how we survive in the meantime. So I will leave you with that thought. Thank you. And let me stop sharing so I can actually see the Zoom screen.
Thank you, Neha. That was excellent and really, really thought-provoking talk. So thank you for sharing all those insights and all that work with us. And I'll go straight to the Q&A because we already have the chat filling up with questions. I think we can stop the recording now. Julia, I'm going to stop it now.